Today, we are jumping into the message of an ancient prophet named Zephaniah. Now, his book is quite a ride. It starts with some really fierce warnings and divine anger, but it ends with this surprising, powerful message of hope. It's a story all about crisis and renewal that honestly feels more relevant than ever. So let's dive in. So let's kick things off with a huge question that really frames this entire book. We tend to think of divine judgment as, the end of the line, total destruction. But what if its ultimate goal wasn't just to tear things down, but to cleanse, to purify? That's the big idea we're going to unpack here. To really get what Zephaniah is talking about, we have to understand this one key concept, the day of the Lord. Now, this isn't some 24-hour day on the calendar. Think of it more like a moment of truth. Anytime God steps directly into human history to confront evil and get things done. It's a day of reckoning, and for the people Zephaniah was talking to, it was right around the corner. Okay, so who was the guy delivering this pretty intense message? To get the prophecy, you've got to first understand the prophet and the wild times he was living in. So this is Zephaniah. His name probably means Yahweh hides, which was kind of mysterious, right? But here's the real kicker, his family tree. The guy was the great-great-grandson of King Hezekiah. He had royal blood. So this wasn't some random outsider shouting from the desert. No, he was an insider with a backstage pass to the corridors of power in Jerusalem, and he was calling out the nation's corrupt leaders right to their faces. And his world was on a knife's edge. The northern kingdom of Israel, already wiped off the map. The old superpower, Assyria, was starting to stumble, and a new, even scarier threat, Babylon, was rising. Zephaniah is basically screaming at his people, look at the clock, it's ticking. The fall of Jerusalem wasn't some far-off theory. It was just a few decades away. The stakes literally could not have been higher. So why the urgent warning? What was the big emergency? Well, Zephaniah's message wasn't really about foreign enemies. It was about a deep, rotten problem right in the heart of Judah itself. On the surface, you might have thought things were getting better. They had a good king, Josiah, who was pushing for major reforms. But here's the thing. You can't just pass a law to change people's hearts. For over 50 years, evil kings had encouraged wickedness, and it wasn't just a bad habit anymore. It was deep in the culture. And Zephaniah breaks this corruption down into three main types. First, you had the people who went all in on foreign gods like Baal, just totally pagan. Second, you had the syncretists, the folks who tried to have it both ways. They'd worship Yahweh, but they'd also worship the stars and mix in pagan rituals. And third, and maybe the most dangerous, were the people who were just indifferent. They didn't care. They figured God doesn't reward or punish, so why bother? And this rot started right at the very top. This quote gives you a stunningly brutal picture of the leadership. They weren't shepherds protecting the people. They were predators, roaring lions and hungry wolves just devouring their own people through violence and injustice. So, with the problem laid out so clearly, Zephaniah pivots to the solution. And it is absolutely terrifying. He describes the fierce day of the Lord. He paints this coming judgment with three powerful images. The first one is a great purification. It's like God is about to come through for a divine deep clean, sweeping the land and removing every single trace of idol worship. Every corrupt priest, every false altar, everything has to go. The second picture, well, it gets even more chilling. He describes a great sacrificial feast, but in a horrifying twist, Judah is the sacrifice. And the invited guests coming to feast on this offering, that would be the invading Babylonian army. And finally, the third picture is just a great battle. And this isn't a metaphor. He's talking about the real sounds of war, trumpet blasts and battle cries against the fortified cities. It's a raw, violent confrontation with sin. Zephaniah really doesn't pull any punches here. He just piles on these words: distress and hardship, devastation and ruin, darkness and gloom. He's trying to paint a picture of the absolute terror of what's coming. He wants you to feel it. There is going to be nowhere to hide. But just when you think this is all about Judah, Zephaniah pulls the camera way back. He makes it clear that this day of the Lord, this reckoning, isn't just local, it's global. He systematically goes around the compass, just ticking off the nations. To the west, Philistia. To the east, Moab and Ammon. Down south, Ethiopia. And up north, even the mighty superpower, Assyria. The point is crystal clear. Nobody is exempt from this. And his prophecy against Nineveh, Assyria's capital, gets right to the heart of the matter.
Why are all these nations being judged? For their pride. Nineveh saw itself as invincible, the center of the world. I am unique, they thought. And Zephaniah says that very arrogance is what will turn their great city into a pile of rubble. The lesson is powerful. God is the fierce enemy of pride. Now, after all of that darkness and devastation and judgment, you'd think that's the end of the story. But it's not. The book takes this remarkable turn, pivoting from all that wrath to a promise of restoration. This leads to the obvious question, right? After hearing about universal judgment, roaring lions, and becoming a sacrificial meal, you have to wonder, is there any hope at all? Is total destruction the final word? And the answer is yes, but it's conditional. There is a path to safety, but it isn't a cheap one. It requires action. Seek the Lord. Strive for what's right. Strive to be humble. And notice he says maybe you'll be protected. It's not a guarantee, it's a desperate, hopeful plea to turn back. And this takes us right back to our opening question. The apocalypse is a purification. The whole point of the terrifying day of the Lord isn't just to destroy, but to forge a new community, a small, humble, and faithful group of people, a remnant who truly trust in God. This really summarizes the entire arc of the book. The judgment is meant to transform the people. The prideful and arrogant will be replaced by the humble. The corrupt and violent leaders, those roaring lions, will be replaced by a pure and just people who are described as peaceful sheep who can finally rest without fear. It's a total reversal. And the book ends with this absolutely breathtaking image. After all the anger and wrath, the final picture is of God not as a judge, but as a loving protector, a warrior who saves. He's right there in the middle of his purified people, delighting in them, renewing them by his love, and even shouting for joy over them. It's one of the most powerful pictures of God's restorative grace you'll find anywhere. So we're left with this question. Zephaniah's message takes us on this intense journey from a stark warning against corruption and pride all the way to a beautiful promise of humble restoration. It forces us to ask, in a world that is still full of crisis and judgment, where can we find that same path? The one that leads from purification to hope.